My guest this week has a hell of a story. At the age of 28, he bankrupted his family business whilst addicted to alcohol and cocaine. His name is Doug Fleener, and he went on to transform his life by finding 12-step recovery. And it is in the wisdom of those rooms that he developed this message of radical simplicity, of keeping it in the day. I've read his book and have had a great deal of practical value from it. So he brings this message to his clients as an executive coach. He's a brilliant raconteur and a fantastic and very powerful message. So let's dive in. Okay, and welcome to another episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say I'm here with Mr. Doug Fleener. He is the author of this book, The Day Makes the Year, Makes a Life, Transform Your Work and Life with One Day Success. He's a former executive with the Bose Corporation, and I absolutely love Bose stuff, as I was saying to Doug as I came on. So that's a big plus for me. You're an advisor, especially to customer service leaders. Yeah, you're a coach, you're a speaker, and obviously an author. So, Doug, it's fantastic to have you on the show.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Now, I've been doing this podcast a while, and a lot of these books start with an origin story. How did this book come about? And yours blows all of them away. I mean, as I was saying, in the first 100 words, an absolute roller coaster, really, of a life story. So, I would love it if you could share, where this all started for you, this philosophy around, keeping it in the day.
Yeah. So, throughout my life, I had some priorities, and the biggest priority was partying, staying high, and drinking a lot, and so throughout my 20s, I was living in South Florida. It was in the 80s during the Miami Vice days. And I worked in my father owned a marina, so I was in the boat business. Then I opened up a marine supply store. And so many of my customers of my marine supply store were actually drug runners. And so for the longest time, I kind of had a little business going. I'd order in stuff and I'd give it to them, and I'd trade it for cocaine. And it's hard to keep a business going when that's your cash flow is paid in powder. And so anyway, about the mid 1980s, around 87, my father was my partner in this business, and he couldn't figure out why we were busy and always had real cash flow issues. And honestly, it's because it was just, I was drinking it and I was going up my nose. And so finally he started to kind of dig in to see what the problem was. And I knew the gig was up. And, it was just kind of, I'd been on this run that I was doing the things I knew I shouldn't do. I was morally, spiritually, financially bankrupt in all three of those phases. But I knew it was up. So what I decided to do was, instead of face my father, I'm 28 years old, so I decided to run away from home. And so I had a big Super Bowl party, and I believe it was the Broncos and the Giants playing each other in 1987. And I drank and drugged all night, got up that morning, went to the airport, bought a one-way ticket. Because if I'm leaving Florida, where am I going to go? So I got a ticket to Hawaii. And, at least it's nicer in Florida. Anyway, I get on the plane, and this was pre 9/11. So it was pretty easy to travel in a blackout. And I don't really remember much other than, and this is the story that opens the book. I was on the plane. I woke up, and I'm in this seat, and my eyes are still kind of closed. And I'm like, where am I? Which was not unusual, of waking up and not knowing where I was. And then all of a sudden I heard that we'd be landing at an airport in Texas. And all of a sudden I open my eyes and I'm in the center seat of an airplane. No idea how I got there. And then it all kind of came back to me.
Mm.
And so obviously this was a huge bottom of my life. But I also had, it ended up being the most important day in my life. That, that when we all had bottoms. I hit a lot of new bottoms along the way.
Yeah.
And I don't talk about in the book, but I'd gotten a DWI. I mean, I had all these signposts and I just ran the car right through the signpost. And so I got off the plane, and actually just so happens my brother lived in the same town, in the same city. So I hung out with him for a couple of days and flew back home and met with my father and realized that I had to make a change in my life.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I completely relate to that. I've also been in recovery and had my own rock bottom. So this absolutely wasn't quite as glamorous as landing in Hawaii, but you know,
I never
I
made it to Hawaii.
you didn't make it to Hawaii. You didn't get that
No,
far.
I got to Houston,
Okay, right.
Dallas. Excuse me, it was Dallas.
Yeah, and then what was your father's reaction? So, well, first of all, what do you say to your father? Yeah, I'm interested in that first.
Yeah,
account.
he had me stay there a few days. He was too upset to talk to with me, and there's just times in life where you're just so you're just doing all these things you didn't want to do, but you're doing them anyway. And I can say it was the alcoholism and the addiction, but ultimately I had to own it,
Yeah,
and I had to own it with my father. And he was obviously pretty upset, and sometimes we hurt the people who we're closest to, and so we met. And actually, this is one of the stories in the book too. It's actually one of my favorite stories. Is he insisted that I go see this therapist that a friend of his daughter was seeing, and so I go there, and he's a really interesting. He's also a hypnotist, and I told him the story and the drinking and the drugs, and he says, he goes, I have this theory that alcoholics are actually warriors of the past, but there's no wars to fight anymore. So I'd like to hypnotize you and talk to that warrior. And I'm like, oh, hell no. Yeah. I'm kind of sorry now I didn't. It could have been really interesting. But his theory didn't resonate with me. But what he did tell me was that I probably need to go to a recovery meeting.
right,
And I went into recovery, and I was not going all in. I was going to keep smoking pot, and I was going to give up the cocaine because I thought that was a real problem. But I was going to only quit drinking for a year. And but luckily, I met some people, and what I could see is how they could live in a way that I never could live.
right.
They were happy without drinking. We were happy without drugs, and my life was just a total disaster. I'd hurt everyone who'd ever come in contact with, and I had an ex fiance, I had ex this and ex that. I quit at everything I did, and so I went in and realized that I heard somebody say that they had used their lifetime allotment of drinking up.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. So at age 28 years old, I've used my lifetime of drinking up.
Yeah.
And so I just decided I'd just go all in, and thank God I did, because I don't know if I'd be alive today. And I
Right.
definitely wouldn't have had the business, personal and business success I've had as a result.
Yeah. Yeah. And how was it in those early days of recovery? Yeah, dealing without the drink and
Mm.
cocaine and kind of getting on in life. How was that for you?
It was not fun. It was not easy. But the best part is I went to a couple meetings and kind of was like really all shook up. First meeting I went to, I felt like I'm not Catholic, but every time I went to a Catholic funeral, I never knew what to do. And I kind of felt that way at my first meeting. Second meeting, I kind of just kind of broke down and admitted that I had an issue. And then third meeting I went to, I walked in, it was this big meeting. It was lit up and people were laughing. And I looked over and I saw two of my customers from my marine supply store. And I was like,
Right.
oh my God. And but it was awesome. They walked up to me and they came to either side of me, and one of them turned to me and said, "We've been waiting on you." So
Mm.
I was clearly a very public drunk, and then my life got worse.
Ah,
And I was thinking, and I just started losing everything. But one of the things I learned out of this was my life had to kind of get worse before it got better, because I had to lose the things I needed to lose,
right.
and I had to kind of rebuild my life.
Yeah.
And so I had to sell the business as a result, and sold on pennies on the dollar. I had to take a job at a mall that I didn't want, and but everything ended up working out the way it was supposed to work out, and my life started to get better and better a day at a time.
Right. And and that's the theme for the whole book, right? A day at a time. That's really the core of the philosophy. And so what's when you say it started to get better and better, what started to improve?
Well, first and foremost was, one of the things I did was learn how to live a day at a time. And, this is not a recovery book, but rather the lessons that I learned in recovery that helped me in business, and the business lessons that actually helped me in recovery. And so, the biggest thing I learned is that I could just live in the day and try to be a better person each day, live without a drink, live without a drug. Um, so when you start, um, when you've done the things that I had done to my family, again, I mean, I'm very comfortable saying, look, I was a thief, I was a liar, I was a cheat. I wasn't a good person, and you know, that's not hard to do when you're able to kill those feelings with alcohol and drugs.
Right.
But
Yeah.
when all of a sudden you start to have to live with your past, you have to live with your emotions, you have to live with those feelings and those regrets. And that's where kind of this learning to live it a day at a time really started to kick in for me, is that, I couldn't change the past, but I could change who I was today. And
Yeah.
if I put together a good day, I'd have a good day and another good day and another good day. And as a result, I dropped out of college. I was going to school full time, working party full time, partying full time. Something had to give, so of course I quit school. Which was crazy. Um, and so, I had quitted everything I had done, and I had a family business. But after that, I was hardly employable,
Right.
and I had to start to build it. Now I could look back, and one of the reasons I wrote this book is, you know, these principles of recovery was able for me to end up doing things in my life that I never would have dreamed I could do, ever. And I want to give that kind of hope to everybody that, wherever you're at today, it's, it's today. And if you have a good day today, that's how you have a better day tomorrow. You string them together, and anything is possible.
Yeah. And this simplicity, I mean, you've got a a chapter in the book is dedicated to practice relentless simplicity, and that's something I've taken away from this book. Just to have you don't talk about goals, you talk about intentions, but just having a single intention for the day. I love just to keep it simple. Yeah, can you talk a bit more about this idea of relentless simplicity?
Yeah. Look, so I think one of the things that that I learned in recovery in the beginning, and was really able to carry into, again, the rest of my personal life and in business, was to really just keep it simple. The old, keep it simple, stupid. Although I don't like the stupid part, so I like to go the KISS, keep it successfully simple. And I sometimes heard someone once say that, and they talk about recovery. They'd say that, the program of recovery wasn't that hard, but the problem is, as humans, we're so complicated.
Mm,
And so, what I kind of learned out of relentless simplicity is be able to look at everything and say, really, look, of all the things that are going on in my life, all the things that are going on in my day, all of my email, you name it. Ultimately, there's just one or two things that really matter the most. And when I can get down to those core principles, those core elements, I can pretty much take anything on. Almost everything else is really just background information and noise and everything else. And it is, and it is something that someone can learn, because I wouldn't have known it without it. And there was another book I had read in business years ago about simplicity that also really kind of helped spur my ability to put simplicity into practice in business.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe we could talk about that. But this idea of just keeping it in the day, because when I was in recovery, I'm not active in the rooms anymore, although I've stayed, away from all of the substances and everything else. But I remember that line, like, keep it in the day. And what I'd found with this, having one intention for the day, I tried it maybe a year ago, and I just couldn't stick with it. And I'm trying it again but based on your book, and I think it's just this recollecting that 12-step imperative, the recovery and imperative of just keeping it in the day, really helped to solidify the idea. But also, I think I probably evolved through my own work just to kind of have the faith that everything's going to be okay, right? Everything's going to be okay, whatever happens. And you can pick one thing, and one thing is enough. So this sense of like being enough and having one important thing as being sufficient is what's helped me, I think, kind of catch this idea this time around.
Yeah, and I think anytime I coach a lot of people and different leaders, and one of the things that I find is that they often get overwhelmed with the future,
Mm.
and a lot of the variables that they feel they can't control. And we talk about that in a minute as one of the true principles. But it's it's what you do today that makes the future. Your future, everything you do today is what creates your future, because you can't work in the future. And and so for a lot of people, they get just so overwhelmed and so wrapped up that they just do nothing. And
Mm.
and I think one of the early practices I learned is that what am I going to do about it? I remember I was about maybe, I don't know, 60 days sober, and I was sitting having coffee with some old guys it was at the Lighthouse Cafe in Tequesta, Florida. Uh, and I was talking to this guy, and I didn't really hardly know him, and I'm just telling him everything what's wrong in my life. The guy just looks at me and goes, wah, wah, wah. And I was so taken back by it. And he goes, what are you going to do about it? And that's where I've kind of learned, I'll give myself, if I'm frustrated, something's not going the way I want, I'll give myself a minute or two
Yeah.
to think, to feel it. But then I have to transition it to, what am I going to do about it? And look, sometimes doing nothing is an action, right? But it's really about, how do I maximize today? And again, every morning I'm really big on journaling. I wake
Yeah.
up every morning and I journal on, what do I want to accomplish? But more important is, who do I want to be?
Right.
When I'm focused on who I want to be, the work follows. And so I try to not be too self-centered, and what can I do for others in a day?
I like that. Who do I want to be? And I also like this technique of yours of like not writing down the goal for the day. Well, first of all, I just again reiterate, I love this idea of just one goal, keep it simple, but also have that be an intention. Right. And can you talk a bit about the distinction between goal and intention?
Yeah. So I think I talk about intentional actions create intentional results, right? So sometimes if the goal, I think, can get in our way of so when I talk about intentional actions create intentional results, is I want to prioritize what's really most important. And so often if I go into a business and I meet with an owner, all the things they're focused on doesn't do jack for the revenue, right? And uh, one of my favorite stories is, I had a guy once, and I was visiting his retail store, and he was telling me all this stuff he's doing, and then he told me he wanted to franchise it, and then I pointed out that he was actually losing money every year. So I'm not sure why anyone would want to pay a franchise fee to lose money. You can lose money on your own. You don't need to pay a franchise. Right. But he was so focused on the littlest details. Right. And instead, so if, the intentional results is, I want to hit a certain revenue amount. And I don't call it a goal because I like the word intentions because it really aligns with my actions. What's my intentions for the day?
Mm.
And then if I know what my intentional results I want, I can align my actions with it.
Yeah. And one example you had in a book, which I loved, and it's not exactly this, but it was instead of make 10 sales calls, it was nurture and build my business relationships, right? Something like that. But that's been really, really helpful for me because I do have got that journaling practice, and I will write goals down. I literally use the word goal, but I don't use the word intention. I don't think in terms of intention, and me having flipped that has made a big difference for me. One, because I can see that this now is more likely to get a conducive result for what I'm out for achieving in the world, but also because it's just easier to take on the goal when it has a sort of spiritual meaning, right, and not just like a task I need to kind of grind out.
Right. And I think that's the thing is right. If you look, most people write out tasks for the day.
Mm.
Right. And so, one of the things I always really emphasize to leaders, business owners, executives is I'm really big on the word priorities. Right. What's our priorities for the day? Right. And one of the things I love is, I saw a little picture once. It was like what you think your employees hear, and it was a single dot. And then on the other side, it's what they really hear, and there's like 100 dots.
Right.
Right. And so, right, the role of great leadership and just in being, I think, a successful person is understanding I'm going to circle one of those dots. I'm going to do the multiple things that can help me achieve that. And then I'll move on to the other dot.
Mm.
But most of us try to tackle all 100 dots at the same time and really accomplish nothing.
Yeah, and that I relate to that so much, and that of course builds overwhelm and stress, and then you kind of get to the end of the day, and you're like, well, I've done like 10 things half-assed, and it just never
Right.
feels so good as just like, and I'm really loving the fact now I'll get to my journal the next morning. I'm like, did I do my one thing yesterday? Tick. Yes, I did. Right.
Right.
It's improving my happiness. Yeah, it's fantastic. Um, Taking responsibility is another principle. Can you
Yeah.
say more about that?
Yeah. This to me is probably, it's Uh, when you really get down to it, there's 6 principles. 3 are kind of mindsets, 3 are kind of actions. And so the first 2 of these mindsets to me are just so important. One is living in the day, really creating this one day success. Everything I can to be successful for today. But it's really about taking responsibility. And in the book, I talk about being a superpower for personal and professional success. And that definitely came out of recovery because early in my recovery, uh, one of the guys I was working with basically, told me that whenever there is something wrong, it's within me. And yeah, and I remember being so outraged. It's like, okay, you take away my alcohol and drugs, and gambling and all these other addictions, and now you tell me I got to be a doormat, and that everything's my fault. And what I learned over a period of time is, and this is kind of to me one of the biggest takeaways out of this book and this particular principle is, you can't change what you don't own. You can't change what you don't own. So if I'm a victim of the economy, if somebody's causing this to me, I don't have the power to change it. But when I own it, I do have the power to get through it, change it, to make it better, to make it go away, or what have you. And so to me, this is one of the principles that, and I've worked with some people who really got them to change how they see things. One of the examples and I use a lot is, if someone rear ends me in the car, I'm in the car and someone rear ends me, for some people, it ruins their week, their day, their week, their month, and so it just throws them so far off. And instead, the facts is somebody hit me. Now I got to do something about it. I may not be to blame unless I hit the brakes because they were tailgating me or something. Right. But, I got to go get the car fixed and I got to own it and move past it. And that is owning something that someone else literally did, but I can own it because I get to decide how I'm going to feel about it.
Right. Right. And that is such a powerful message. And I think it talks to, well, you said it as well, not just success in business, but success in life. If I just assume that I have got a role to play in all circumstances in my life, even if that's not always true, it gives us avenue for acts to change something, right? As exactly you say, it gives us opportunities to make a difference where otherwise that's not true.
Yeah. And, I've, my friend Steve, and when you think about taking responsibility in relationships, and that's usually what throws us off, right? Relationships with other humans, whether it's, in the home or at the workplace or in groups or what have you. And my friend Steve, and he said this, I was like, whoa. He one day said to me, he says, I'm 100% responsible for 50% of every relationship.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so I have to own my 100% of my half of that relationship. But what I can't do is own what that other person's half is. I can own what I say and how I say it, but I can't own how they hear it.
Yeah. 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 I like that. And I like the other related idea, deciphering, is this my side of the street or their side of the street? And okay, this is what are the and always assuming there's something on my side of the street I can, as a base assumptions that I can look at, right?
Absolutely. I was talking with a friend the other day, and we were talking about he made an apology to somebody. He had messed up at work, and so he apologized, and then he said it didn't go well. And I was like, what do you mean it didn't go well? Well, the person, how they reacted and everything. So the thing is he did an apology with an expectation of an outcome.
Right.
Right. And all he could do is do the best possible apology he could make. But it's up to the other person for how they decide. But he didn't like how they reacted. And so he labeled it as it didn't go well. And it
Right.
didn't go well, didn't go bad, didn't go, it just was.
Yeah.
And you've
And
done your part and move on.
yeah, you've done your part. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And owning that and taking responsibility for that. It makes
Yeah.
total sense.
And the other thing I'd add is where this really helped me is, and I bankrupted a family business. This was back in the 80s. We're a small business, and I stole over $100,000 in 1980 money. Right. And so I couldn't afford for this to hold me back forever. And so what I had to do was just own it. And so the way I owned it was, for my father. My father was the most forgiving man, and his wife, uh, she was forgiving. And what I did is I started just, I could live my life in a way that I could take responsibility and pay them back. And so for years and years, I would just send them money. I would do things for them. And that's the way that I took responsibility. Saying I'm sorry is one thing, but really kind of owning it and moving it forward is different.
Yeah. Yeah. Your fifth principle: improve 3 things daily. Yeah. What's that about?
Yeah, this is so uh and for if a lot of you may have read James Clear, Atomic Habits, and he talks about improving 1% a day. I'd actually heard other people say it even before he wrote the book. So it's been around a long time. And so a lot of people say, I want to improve 1% a day. I'm not smart enough to figure out what that 1% is. I, I have no idea if I do something, is it 1%, is a tenth of a percent, a hundredth of a percent, 5%? I have no idea. And being a simple guy, and I like to do concrete things, is um, I had a manager once teach me how to improve something when he was teaching me how to improve the store. This was back in if you remember the Sharper Image days, and he was a very experienced manager. And he took me outside the store and he says, I want you to find 3 things that need improved. And I was like, looks good to me. Well, he could find 20 things because he had a much more critical eye and trained eye than I had. So he says, what I want you to do is when you come walking up, I want you to look and find 3 things. And I want you to fix them. And then the next day, I want you to fix 3 things. And maybe you have to get further into the store to fix the 3 things and get deeper and deeper. And I was able to take that little lesson about how to improve a store and use it to improve my life and my business. And so it's much more concrete than a 1%. Is I just, at the end of a day, I want to be able to say I improved 3 things. It could be me as a person. It could be something in my business. It could be on a website. It could be on how we do something with customer service. It could be paying a bill on time. But when you improve 3 things a day, you make 1,095 improvements in a year. That adds up.
Yeah. And why is it 3 and not 1? Does that not go against the radical simplicity?
Nobody's asked me that. I like that, Rich. I think it's because for me, first of all, it's because that's what he told me, right? It was like,
Right.
improve 3 things.
Okay.
And I took it. Why was it not 10 things? Well, 10 would overwhelm it. And I think one of the things that what this really helped me, and I think 3 helped me, is to look again a little deeper, a little closer at things. I mean, I sent an email out yesterday, and I scanned it, and and then I had a typo in. Of course, it was in the subject line, and I didn't let it ruin my day. Oh well, I'm human, and but that's the sort of thing that was reminding. I took away from that as a reminder is look, anything I'm going to put something out, I got to take that extra minute, reminding myself, take the extra minute and read it out loud.
Mm.
And that's just one of the simple 3 things, for the improvements yesterday.
Right. Got it. And then you finish off with giving to get your 6th principle. Yeah. Why is that so important to you?
Well, I think when I first went into recovery, I had all these people willing to help me, and I remember thinking, "What's in it for you? Right? You're going to charge me later?" Um, and and one of the principles of recovery is that to keep it, you give it away, and that when I help someone else, it helps me even more. And so what I and give to get is when I go out of my way to help another person, I'm going to get some kind of return. And I don't necessarily expect a return, but there's karma. But there's a little saying I love, and this especially for people who manage others is I love the line is to teach is to learn twice. And so
Mm.
every time I teach something, I learn it again, and I get to go to another level. And I think part of also giving a get and helping others is right is we remain teachable. When
Right.
when we
Interesting. Yeah, I've
help
not heard that
others,
before. Yeah.
yeah, and then they, we're able to just take so much away from it. So I, part of my trying to be a good person every day, and I journal about it and prepare for it is, again, I have kind of simple things. And this one's 5, not 3. Is every day I try to do 5 good things, and I do this so that my intentions for my day are on others, not on me. And I always joke because I get my girlfriend her coffee every morning, and she'll sometimes say, "Well, there's your first one." Um, yes, but I wanted to get you a cup of coffee too. But I find that when I get out of myself and I do for others, I just again get so much. But I had to turn it into something very practical. So, excuse me, a reminder pops up in my phone, 8 o'clock every morning. Do 5.
Right. And you managed to set, because I immediately think like, God, could I do? I might think I'd had a good day if I did 1. 5 sounds like a lot. Do you hit 5 most days?
Yeah, because I'm very intentional about it. So
Yeah.
I and what's funny is it's like Like if I let you turn in front of me, that counts. Yeah, we're at an intersection.
Right.
You turn in front of me. Now, when I'm not very nice to someone, I lose some. I got to make it up. And I keep score throughout the day.
Oh,
And I
okay.
do this because there's an element of humans that we're self-centered, and it probably goes back to our survival.
Mm.
Uh, but I have to work to not be a self-centered person. And I'm okay saying that. And I
Yeah.
know that when I'm not a self-centered person, I am happier for it. So that's why I make it a very intentional actions every day.
Right. And those 5 things, they have to be, do they have to be in secret? Like nobody knows you're doing them? Like the
Yeah,
Buddhist
I don't put a lot of
idea?
rules. I don't put a lot of rules around it, but I do keep score. And yeah, it again, it just gets me. I just know that when I do something for others, I feel better about myself, and I'm really on guard to not be self-centered person now. And which
Yeah.
is interesting because yeah, as a speaker and a coach, you're seen as an authority, and so you want to project strength. But but when I do a speaking engagement, I'm not trying to get all smiles on the little sheets that they give. I actually okay that some people don't like me because my job isn't to make you happy. My job is to make you think.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And,
that makes.
and right, if I'm self-centered, all I care is that everybody likes me.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense. And are you still actively in the rooms? Are you still in recovery right now?
Yeah, I am. I'm coming up on my 37th year
Wow.
in February. I
Congratulations.
the infamous blackout flight was in January, but I still participated in some use of things. So my sobriety date is February 3rd. I I go to at least 3 meetings a week,
Right.
and one of the ways I try to live my life and my sobriety is that I simplify, of course. Is I like to think that at any time I'm moving towards a drink and a drug or away from a drink and a drug, and I do the same for success. At any given moment, my actions are I'm either moving towards success or moving away from success. And
Right.
so, I don't I like to go because I'm not in fear of drinking again and using drugs again. Although I do lecture to my children that, back in my day, I had to go wake up the pot dealer. I can't just go down to the store. Here in Massachusetts, it's legal. So they can just, you know, I sometimes get resentful because there's like 7 dispensaries within like a mile of my house. But it's not for me. God bless anyone who
Yeah.
can. I know a lot of people can partake, and it doesn't affect them. But I just I go so I know that I keep my defense from going back to being that person I was. And I'm
Right.
not going to immediately go back to drinking, but what's going to happen is I'm going to become an ass. I'm going to get self-centered, and that's going to. And I don't know how far. I think I'm a long ways away from a drink. What I don't know is how fast is the decline down. It could be pretty
Right.
fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you do anything else as well as working, the recovery program to manage your overall health and well-being?
Yeah, I first of all, I think music is very important to me, and so I used a lot of music to kind of concentrate and center myself. Um, and I do quite a bit of reading, and and probably what I get probably most is I have a nice network of friends who we're able to talk, and we're very just kind of open and honest. In a lot of relationships, we put on a front,
Yeah.
right? And so when someone says, "How you doing?" I'm great. And instead, you're feeling like crap at that minute. And I need to have friends that I talk to every day that I can say how I'm really feeling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that to me is huge. And I think you don't need to be in recovery for that. but you just need to be as vulnerable enough to let people in.
Yeah. But I think what's great about the recovery programs is that it's easy to build a network of friends like that inside of that environment, right? That was
Yeah,
my
and it's
experience when I
interesting
was
because a
in
lot
there.
of people, Zoom has really changed. So, you can pretty much do a meeting any hour of the day. And, so I do a combination of in person and Zoom.
Right.
And, what I also need to hear is that I need to hear from people who are struggling and remind me. Quick story. So when I got sober back in '87, I met a guy by the name of Fred T. And Fred T had like 53 years in. So he went back to the very, very early days of recovery. And I remember saying to him, and I'm newly sober, I'm like, man, 53 years must be so easy to stay sober. And he goes, no, Doug, I actually have to work harder at it because it's been 53 years.
Right. Yeah. 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 It's easy to get complacent, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And all of a sudden you can remember, yeah, that airplane ride I woke up in a blackout. It's not like, the stewardesses were sitting next to me and we're having laughs like the commercial would be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. It just reminds me of a story of some, I think a couple who were in the rooms and they'd been in for something like that, like 40, 50 years. And they went on a cruise ship and, a cruise liner excursion. And there were no recovery meetings on this cruise ship. And the story was, I think they were dead within 2 weeks.
Mm. I have a friend who actually he had been told that when he goes on a cruise that there'll always be a recovery meeting, and so he got on the cruise ship and it was like at 3 p.m. every day, and it said what room, and he went there every day at 3 p.m. and he was the only person. But what I love is he went every day.
Right. Yeah.
He just
Yeah.
sat there, right, and with his thoughts uh, about again, what he was doing and who he wanted to be and who he had been,
Yeah.
and kept him clean for that trip.
Right. Right. Great. And so what would be your message to people listening to this who may be struggling with drugs or with alcohol or some other addiction? What do you tend to offer people in that situation?
Yeah, and the timing is such, right? Because we're right in the thick of the holidays,
Mm,
and sometimes we maybe drink a little bit more than we want, and then we go into the first of the year. Um, yeah, all I know is that if you're thinking maybe you're drinking too much, then stop and take a look at it. You can go to a kind of a recovery meeting. You can find things again online. Um, there's all kinds of resources out there. There's a joke that says, if you come to a recovery meeting, don't worry. If you're not an alcoholic, you're not going to catch it from us. Um, right. But yeah, and I think the thing is, I think for a lot of us, we actually used to think, right, that the drunk was the bum on Skid Row and everything, and they're all around us. And look, and I also do believe that someone can drink heavy and not be an alcoholic.
right.
So they're able to keep their life. Uh, uh, they're not powerless over it, and their life doesn't get out of control. But if you think you're struggling a little bit, try 30 days, 60, 90 days. Go without it. But don't do it alone, because I think this is just something, again, when I wrote this book is it wasn't I wanted to tell people how to use recovery. What I wanted to share people is here are the things I learned in recovery that helped me be much more successful than I ever could have dreamed of. But I
Yeah.
never could have got there if I didn't get the alcohol and the drugs out of the way.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. And I like what you said, particularly about, these online surveys that actually really helped me in my beginning I did one of these surveys and I came out, as having a problem with alcohol. And it was great just to have that confirmation. I got confirmation from others after that, but that definitely started on my journey of like breaking the denial.
Yeah,
I
I need
think
to
that,
hear how other people are struggling and how other people are doing well. I was on a meeting earlier this week, and there was a guy from it was 3 a.m. in Israel, and he'd been 2 days sober, and he goes, yeah, and if you didn't know, there's a war going on, and and it's like, oh man, I didn't have to have a war, right? The only war I had was between these years.
yeah, yeah,
But and he was dealing with anxiety, and just stopping and realizing that you're not the only person who kind of has some problems, and sometimes other people's problems are even more. But I
yeah,
never discounts anyone's issues, right? Again, it's just what do we do about it?
yeah, yeah. And I think taking those first step and really looking at our pattern and, is it healthy? And then finding an environment like a 12-step group is, yeah, amazing. Brilliant. Well, thank you, Doug. This has been just fantastic. And as you say, there's just a ton of wisdom in these rooms, in this philosophy around recovery that we can apply to day-to-day life, to success in business. And I constantly met people in the recovery groups who'd been in 5-10 years and really did have very successful lives as a result of applying this approach, this philosophy to life. And you've just condensed it all in a book, which is fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll put a link to the book again. The day makes the year, makes the life. Where else would you send people who are interested in, perhaps you as a speaker or as an advisor, as a coach?
Yeah. So, first of all, the book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and also on my website. Makes a great Christmas present. And if you want to learn more about me, it's at dougfleener.com.
Yeah,
And I run a blog and I run a weekly newsletter, and everything kind of what we talked about it's not about recovery, but it's really helping people create higher levels of daily performance, and that's where your future is created day at a time.
yeah. And I should say again, I've been around self-help books for decades, and I was finding real practical value in this.
Thank you, that means a lot.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
yeah, yeah. All right. Thanks once again, Doug. We'll put the links to the book into your website as well into the show notes. But yeah, it's been a great pleasure to have you on. Thank you.
Enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.